Hey y'all! Today we're making Pupusas Revueltas de Chicharrón from start to finish. I'm making the Curtido first. I'm going to use a small cabbage, red onion, jalapeño because we like a little spicy, a carrot, oregano, apple cider vinegar, and a little salt. I'll also use some hot and cold water later on. I split the cabbage in half to make it easier to take out the core. I just cut a little triangle and it just pops right out. I'm just doing a rough chop of the whole cabbage. There's no need for it to be a certain size or length. Now I'm going to shred my carrot. Adding red onion is totally al gusto, whatever you like. Not everybody uses it. I'm going to save the rest of my red onion for later because we're going to use it a couple more times. I cut it a little too thick here, so I'm just going to pick out the bigger chunks. I'll give it a nice little mix, and then we're ready for the water. For this amount of curtido, I ended up using about 10 cups of hot water. We're just going to blanch the veggies just to make them nice and soft before we put in the vinegar. I'll let it sit here for maybe 4 or 5 minutes before I drain it. I almost forgot to add the jalapeño, so I'm going to do that here. I'm going to just put half of it because I just want a little something, but not a whole lot. The little one isn't always a huge fan of spicy, but that's okay. Now that I've drained the hot water, I'm adding 1.5 cups of cold water to half a cup of apple cider vinegar. Regular vinegar works just fine as well. 1 to 2 teaspoons of oregano. Are we the only ones that put rice in our salt? We're adding 1 to 2 teaspoons of salt on top of that. Don't worry, I paused the video so that I could pick out the grains of rice. Mix everything up and add it to your curtido. Then I'm going to stir everything together and let it sit for a few hours. Overnight is best if you can. Now it's time to make our salsa. I'm using 7 tomatoes, part of my red onion that I saved from earlier, a green bell pepper, some garlic, caldo de pollo, more oregano, more salt. I'm going to roughly chop about 1/4 of my red onion and then save the rest because I'll use it again later. I'll use about 1/3 of my green bell pepper and also save this because we're going to need it for a chicharrón. I'm adding 1 clove of garlic. And then I'm just going to chop off the ends of my tomatoes and put them in whole because we're going to boil them. I boiled everything until the peel started coming off the tomatoes, so it was about 10 to 12 minutes. Now I'm adding everything to my blender with 1/2 teaspoon of oregano, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and 1/2 teaspoon of caldo de pollo. After about a minute of blending, it looks like this, and it smells so good. Now I'm going to add it back to my pot, bring it to a boil, and then turn off the heat and let it cool. You can also add some water to stretch it out. Now that the salsa and curtido are done, I'm going to get started on the chicharrón. I'm using pork butt roast, about just under 2.5 pounds. While the chicharrón is cooking, we're going to add the rest of our bell pepper, onion, 3 garlic cloves, 2 tomatoes, 1/2 of a red bell pepper, oregano, salt, and caldo de pollo. We're going to blend it all together and add it to our cooked chicharrón afterwards. Don't worry, I'll show you how it works. After chopping the pork, I add it to a pan and I'm going to set it to medium-high heat. I added enough water to cover the meat and then I'm going to put a lid on it for just a few minutes until it starts to boil. After about 10 minutes, we're adding 1 teaspoon of caldo de pollo and then 1 teaspoon of oregano. We'll cover it and let it keep cooking. In the meantime, we have our red and green bell peppers, tomatoes, onions, garlic cloves, caldo de pollo, salt, and oregano blended together because we're going to add that to our cooked chicharrón when we're done. While the chicharrón is still cooking, I'm going to shred my cheese. I'm using mozzarella, and this is about 24 ounces. After about 30 minutes, we went ahead and drained the water, and then let it keep cooking in its own fat for another 15 minutes. At this point, we added 1 teaspoon of caldo de pollo again, because it took out some of the seasoning when we drained it. It took about an hour total to cook, but this is how it looks. Oh, it's so good. Now we're putting our little salsita that we made into the blender with our cooked chicharrón, and we're gonna blend it up into a masa. This is what it looks like. Oh my gosh, it smells so good. I'm putting it back in the pan for about 5 more minutes on medium-high heat. After that, it's all done. Now it's on to making our refried black beans. I'm using 2 cans of black beans. If you have leftover red onion, if not, whatever onion you have, 2 small cloves of garlic, some salt, caldo de pollo, and we're gonna blend it all together. Off to the side, I'm sauteing a quarter of my onion with those 2 little garlic cloves in a little bit of vegetable oil. After adding my black beans, I'm gonna add the onions and garlic. It smells so good. I added 1 teaspoon of salt and 1 teaspoon of caldo de pollo and blended everything until it's smooth. This is the consistency I'm looking for. My pan is on medium-high heat and I've added some vegetable oil to it. Now that it's nice and hot, I'm gonna add the refried beans and I'm gonna cook it down until it becomes kind of like a paste. It's gonna take about 15-20 minutes. I lowered my heat to medium-low, but I have to keep stirring, otherwise it'll burn and I'll have to start over. After about 20 minutes, this is what I want. This looks perfect. Now I'm gonna let it cool while I finish the rest. To my 24 ounces of shredded mozzarella cheese, I'm gonna add just a little bit of hot water and mix it all together. I'm adding it little by little because I don't want it to become mushy. This is the perfect consistency I'm looking for. Now I'm gonna start making the masa for the pupusas. I'm starting off with 4 cups of Maseca and about a teaspoon of salt. It's all a balancing act. To the 4 cups, I'm adding 2 cups of hot water. This is really important to make sure that the consistency is right. I'm using a spoon because obviously I don't want to burn my fingers. Now I'm gonna add 1 cup of cold water. I'll keep stirring this for a little bit until it cools down and then I can use my hands. I have some extra water on hand so that I can add it little by little. Right now it's still too dry, so I gotta add a little bit more water. I went a little overboard on the water, so now I gotta add a little more Maseca. But that's okay, because more pupusas. This is the beautiful consistency I'm looking for. It's so bien suave and it's perfect for my pupusas. Now in a big bowl, I'm mixing the chicharrón, the frijoles, and the cheese together. Some Salvadorians mix them all together before they put them in the pupusas. Others like to take little bits of each individually. For us, I think it's a little easier to do it this way. I have a little bowl here mixed with some vegetable oil and water. This is key to making your pupusas not stick to everything. I'm gonna grab a little bolita of masa and I'm gonna start rolling it in my hands and then patting it. Then I'm gonna kind of slap it back and forth until it becomes flat and wide. Then I'll kind of create a little divot and I'm gonna fill it with my relleno. The chicharrón, the frijoles, and the cheese all mixed together. Now it takes some practice. I'm not a professional by any means. You just keep rotating it and pushing the sides up as you do. If it starts coming out the top, you can push it down a little bit. And my sweet husband was right there to help me because I thought it was gonna slip right out of my hands. But I held on and I packed it in and I got through it. It takes some practice the first few times you do it. But what's beautiful is that it doesn't have to look perfect because it's gonna come out amazing. After I get all of the relleno or the filling inside, I'm just gonna kind of go around and make sure that the ends are sealed up. I'm gonna pat it closed, and you know what? It's fine if it's open a little bit because when it cooks, that little part is gonna ooze out and it's crispy and delicious, and that's probably my favorite part of the pupusa. At this point, I'm gonna kind of pat it back and forth to flatten it out, and then I'll be ready to put it on the comal and cook it. We have the comal on medium heat and we'll be cooking the pupusas for about 3 to 4 minutes on each side. Y'all, I can't even describe how amazing this smells right now. I'm so excited! Pupusas are said to have originated in El Salvador, but are also popular in Guatemala and Honduras. In the 1980s, the Salvadoran Civil War forced a migration to other countries, which made pupusas more widely available. In 2005, it was made the national dish of El Salvador, and November 12th is National Pupusa Day. Yay! I'm so excited to be able to share this recipe with y'all because it's been one of our favorite dishes for so many years. We can taste how much love and passion and culture goes into every pupusa whenever we buy it from the local vendor. I'm so proud of my little helper. This looks awesome. Now to add the finishing touches. I'm gonna stir up the curtido a little bit and then add a nice helping right on top of the pupusas. Then I'm gonna top it off with our beautiful salsa. Don't forget to subscribe to see which country's cuisine we're cooking next. I hope you enjoyed cooking with cariño.